Hello and welcome to Season 5, Episode 3 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today, as always, as has been in the last 4 seasons and 100 and odd episodes that we have recorded, but he has changed his job title since then, which we announced on a previous episode, Principal Cloud Engineer, John Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
I'm not so bad. Yeah, long weekend. It wasn't a long weekend, but it felt very long. Kids' birthday parties and just lots of noise.
Your kids' birthday parties or
Niece.
Ah, right. It was my birthday as well, so I had
and mine.
Adult birthday parties. Not as lewd as that might sound. Just doing things that adults do on their birthdays, which at my age is not a lot, quite frankly.
Curry and pub.
Yeah, steak, wine, curry, beer, that kind of thing. Excessive consumption. Was it Lily Allen's song lyric? I am a weapon of massive consumption. Yeah, that probably.
I mean, you are a bit of a weapon.
Weekend, but, yeah. Anyway, we obviously have way digressed into Lily Allen song lyrics. But before we digress any further, let me introduce today's guest, Matthew Martz. How are you doing today, Matt? Fellow AWS community builder. How are things going in your world?
They're great. Hey, thanks for having me back on. It's been almost exactly 2 years since we recorded the last episode I was on. And hey, happy birthday to you guys.
Thank you. It's great to see you sporting the Captain Cloud T-shirt there that I assume we sent you after the previous recording.
Yep, it's been in my rotation for a little while, but definitely had to wear it today.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm Matt Martz. I'm a principal software architect at a small company called Definitive. We focus on helping modernize old school loyalty rewards experiences with new tech that consumers actually like to use. We're like fully serverless, and yeah, it's a good time.
And I mentioned you're a fellow AWS community builder. Are you in the serverless category with John?
Technically, I'm in dev tools. I do a lot of serverless. A lot of us cross-pollinate. So
I mean, yeah, we've discussed this before. I think just because you're in this, that, or the other category doesn't kind of prevent you from talking about anything. It's just Amazon is a data-driven business, and when you first join, they like to put you in a little box somewhere.
Right.
Well, we've got some dev tools to talk about today. I'm not sure we've got any serverless to talk about today, but serverless dev tools, I suppose. Tell us a little bit more, Matt, about what you do for the community.
So I've been a little lax in creating content. I feel like there's kind of a big, there's so much AI generated stuff out there. I'm trying to keep quality high. So I've only put out maybe a handful of articles over the last year. I'm probably going to shift more towards like YouTube videos, which are less, AI generated for the most part. I've got some ones in my back pockets with MCPs that I'm going to put out soon. So
they are certainly very fashionable right now. We were talking about them last week, I think, modernization with MCP servers on the previous episode of the podcast. And John's been playing with those quite a bit.
Nice.
But they're not on today's agenda. So as regular listeners to the podcast will know.
No, there will be a bit in there.
Is there a bit of MCP? Oh, I suppose there is a bit of Kiro in there, yeah. But well, we'll get to that. Jumping ahead. So as regular
Spoiler
listeners
alert.
To the podcast, I'll go for a third time on that sentence. As regular listeners to the podcast will know, once a week I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. And then John picks a selection of the articles, which may or may not include MCP servers, but he spoiled it. It does. That we share with our guests that we'd like to talk about on the podcast. So the first of those articles does not include MCP servers, but this is an article on the InfoQ site all about how AWS CloudWatch has evolved into a unified put my teeth back in, a unified observability platform with Apache Iceberg support. So, John, what was it that caught your eye? What did you observe in this article about observability that you would like to share with our
that Matt
listeners?
asked to talk about it.
Well, let's let Matt go first then. If Matt,
I just didn't want to talk about VPCs. That's all.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, nothing works without them. But anyway, that's another conversation.
That's another conversation. I thought this article was pretty interesting because Amazon's taking a shot at like Splunk and other like aggregation tools, especially for the multi-account stuff. I know for like my organization, CloudWatch is probably, I think, in our prod accounts is probably like a third of our bill. So anything that can help us wrangle that or do better analysis into the logs, I think is kind of welcome.
So is this helping with the cost of CloudWatch, do you think, or is using this going to push the the cost of CloudWatch up even further?
I think it'll probably push it up even further, but it'll get you a better sense of what your traffic and data is actually doing. You'll have better insights.
Yeah, I mean, in a serverless workload, oh God, dying. In a serverless workload, it's very workload.
New word invented, new hybrid word invented there. Workflow.
Yep. Workflow. I'm going to try and not use that again. Observability is almost always your highest cost, right? Because your compute costs are so low, it's not even worth. They're basically a rounding error on large bills, right? So your observability and your logs are absolutely going to be the highest cost item. And if you look at third-party tools, I'm a big fan of Datadog. I've always liked it, but that's an excellent way of spending money. They just love to charge you money. They're really good at it, to the point where James Eastham, whose name may or may not ring bells for various listeners on the podcast. He works for Datadog. He's part of the Believe in Serverless community, I think, and various other bits and pieces. Whenever I see him, I like to wind him up about it, and will regularly just completely break him with a really lewd joke about, which body part I need to sell to pay my Datadog bill, or if he can buy me the beers because of the amount of money I've given his company, that kind of thing. It's an excellent way of spending money. CloudWatch historically has been quite a bit cheaper, even if it is expensive, right? It's not expensive as a service, but it's one of those things that just kind of, you put lots of logs in and it becomes a large percentage of your bill, right? It's a large line item on the bill. It historically was a bit of a poor cousin, I suppose, a poor relation. If you look at Splunk, if you look at Datadog, if you look at these kind of third-party tools, because they, as Matt said, they did the aggregation really well, right? You just plug them into this account and that account and that account, and you could do that CloudFormation, Terraform, stack sets if you needed to do it across whole orgs. Bang, 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 bang. Oh, look, here's all my data. Brilliant. I know we've done that for landing zones as well for some of our customers, wherein every time they stand up a new account, it just gets Datadog plugged into it. Brilliant. It works. CloudWatch has had changes over the past handful of years that every single one of them, mostly, I've looked at it and gone, that's taking a shot at this feature from Datadog or that feature from New Relic. And it comes back to, I think, Amazon's view. Okay, customer obsession, yes, they want things to be better for their customers in the tools that they provide. Wonderful. It also comes back to the view, I think, that no one else should take their customers' money other than Amazon. How dare they pay other people? They should just pay us. So cool, make a thing that's worth me paying you for, and I'll continue to pay for it. Brilliant, wonderful. It's gotten a lot better, as I say, over the past handful of years. I don't know how much I really care about this particular change with Apache Iceberg support, because it's just cool. You can look at logs in a slightly different way again. Okay, great, thanks. But it's just yet another thing in the list of it's gotten better and better and better and better and better to the point where it's kind of usable now. I know we talk about this with our customer base a little bit, and Datadog kind of used to be our standard, and it is our standard as well, depending on the customer and what they're trying to achieve and the workload and all this kind of thing. But it's no longer just the de facto use that one. It's now a little bit more nuanced because CloudWatch has become so much better.
Yeah, CloudWatch is going from the thing that you use because it's there to now, okay, well, it's removing barriers to entry and removing the need for using some of these other external products like New Relic or Splunk or Datadog or whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. The main reason for using those third-party vendor tools is partly because CloudWatch did not have the functionality, and it now does with every new feature that is released, with every new announcement. The functionality is starting to become, a lot more kind of level with some of these third-party tools. And I guess one of the other benefits of using things within AWS is you don't have to pay the data exfiltration costs to send them into a third party.
No, but platform. You do pay ingest fees for the log, so you kind of still do.
But is that cheaper than exfiltration fees?
Yes, but I couldn't tell you how much by, because you don't. Here's the rub, right? You can actually still pay data egress fees, moving things from one thing in AWS to another thing in AWS if you don't get that right, because that's where you talk about things like VPC endpoints and what have you. Because Matt's favorite thing, VPCs, is you can And I've seen this more times than I care to mention, where people have been stung for things like NAT gateway charges and VPC egress fees, moving log files in and out of CloudWatch because you didn't put the VPC endpoint in, or for moving things in and out of S3 because you didn't put the endpoint in. And okay, some of these endpoints cost money, right? For S3 and for DynamoDB of all things, it's free because it's a gateway endpoint. You just kind of hook it in at the root table level. For everything else, it's an interface endpoint, and you pay for those to exist. But if you're moving enough data in and out that you actually need to think about it, it probably will save you some money. So yes, it's cheaper, but you do have to sometimes pay attention to egress still.
And sometimes people get stung by NAT gateways just sitting there doing nothing because they forgot about them.
Me repeatedly, and it's not always my money, but sometimes it's my money.
Well, let's not go there.
Sounded like a personal jab there.
We found one last week. Well, he found one after I asked him to go and look.
It wasn't even the big ticket item. I was working up some of our own stuff, and we don't run a huge number of our own workloads, but for some well architected stuff that we do, and I was working up things towards why is there a VP? One of those automated tools that AWS produced. The tool itself is really good, and you do this sort of setup stack, and it does a lot of provisioning. And I went, we'll do that again, and then haven't done it for 4 months. It's like, okay,
yep.
Cool. Well, let's move on then from CloudWatch evolving to our second article for this week. And this is all about AWS Backup evolving. So it's not so much news, although it is a recent article published on the 14th of January on the AWS Storage blog. But it's actually a 2025 year in review for AWS Backup, advancing recovery resilience. So this is a recap of a lot of the new features launched in 2025 around AWS Backup. So, John, thoughts on this? What are your favorite things in this year in review for AWS Backup?
I don't know that I have a particular favorite. There's been a number of things that have just made it generally better, right? I always like it when they add new services that it supports, which is good. So now it covers Redshift Serverless, Aurora SQL, which is good. Backup support for EKS, which is good. I don't know how much data you should be keeping in your clusters, though. I would argue that you should be having that in databases or on file systems or something rather than in transit stores. But whatever, it just makes people's lives easier. Restores, good. This isn't this year, but my favorite thing has been for the past 2 years has been automated restore testing. I don't think it's in this list because that wasn't 2025. That was a 2024 thing, but it was kind of towards the back end of 24. And that is absolutely my favorite feature, right? Because one of the things that sysadmin types always like to say, and I am for my sins a sort of sysadmin, is your most recent backup is the last one that you've tested. If you haven't tested the one that you've taken, you don't know if it works. And you can automate that. You can prove that it comes back online, and you can sort of hit those regulatory check boxes. And it gives you a much easier way of making sure that, yes, the data is actually still there. It looks how we like, looks like it's supposed to, and all that kind of jazz. Granted, it doesn't do that bit for you, but it does the heavy lifting piece of picking a backup, picking a backup restore point, bringing it back online and making it available to you. And depending on, again, what that resource is, if it's an EC2, it'll be an AMI. If it's an EBS snapshot, it'll come back on as a volume. If it's a database, it'll come back on as a new database, which means you can kind of connect to it in predictable ways. That is by far and away my favorite feature of backup. And I know it's not in this list, but that's the top one. If you look at... Oh, no, it is. Although it's lost in 2023.
It is further down, but
list, so it's like... Yeah, but that's it really. That's it. And then there's other stuff as well that they've spoken about, things like architecture with control tower and recovery validation. These sorts of things are always quite useful. I know your favorite is probably going to be something about ransomware because you like that as a business person. You like
me or Matt?
Ransomware? No, you.
Yeah, no. I quite like the item level search and recovery that's mentioned in. I don't know, is that like the third or no, it's quite a long way. I've scrolled quite a long way down, maybe 6th or 7th paragraph. But the item level search and recovery capabilities, allowing customers to quickly locate and restore specific files without having to recover the entire EBS volume or S3 bucket, which can certainly speed things up, I guess. So I think that's a pretty cool feature. What about you, Matt? Is any does backup get you excited? Is there anything on here that you think, yeah, that's revolutionary?
I think some of the integrations with like the guard duty scanning of backups is cool. It's not something that like my company specifically would make a lot of use of. I agree that even the 2023 thing about being able to test your backups is important, because if you have an untested backup, it's just wishful thinking, right? Like, you don't know if it actually works or not. And yeah, like my company, we do kind of like data fusion for offers for people for loyalty programs and stuff. A lot of our stuff comes from external partners, and we kind of fuse it together. So pretty much most everything in our system is recoverable in the sense that we could just recreate it from scratch if we need to. So.
Fair enough.
I mean, that is a valid backup strategy, right? I'm always a big fan of only back up the things that you absolutely need to. So this is why I don't quite understand why you're backing up EKS clusters. Like, it's a thing and you can do it if you want, sure. But you should be building that from source, and all of your non-recoverable data should be in a database, really. I don't know, maybe I'm oversimplifying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big infrastructure as code fanboy, like CDK and stuff. So anything that ties CDK into backup and recovery and like any of this stuff, I think is important. And that's a valid backup strategy too, like just having your infrastructure as code and being able to reproduce it in different accounts.
Absolutely. There was something else. Oh, the logically air-gapped vaults. I don't think that was new this year, but I think potentially some improvements to that, which again is a pretty important part of the backup strategy.
I mean, it is and it isn't. I don't really understand them. For the uninitiated, an air-gapped anything is it's like a laptop from the 1980s. It's not connected to anything else. It just exists. It's just there. There's no internet connection to it. If you want to put anything in it, you need USB drives or whatever. It's air-gapped because there's quite literally a gap of air around everything. It's not networked, right? There's been some really, really amusing proof of concept around how you can still break into air-gapped things, and people abusing things like sound cards to send things to open mics and stuff like that, which has just been hilarious. But a logically air-gapped vault, to me, really feels like theatre, because, well, it's air-gapped. Honest.
But it can't be, because you can put things in it, and surely you must be able to get things out of it.
Well, I mean, I can download my database and put it on a USB stick and unplug the USB stick, and it's air-gapped, right?
It's air-gapped, yeah. But how do you bridge the gap when you need to write to it or read from it?
Oh, this is the point. It's then not air-gapped when you're connected to it, and then you disconnect from it, and then it becomes air-gapped again, right? So in the old-fashioned air-gapped physical thing, what you would do is you take your backup and you put it on a big disk, and then you go thunk, done, in, and then it's air-gapped. Wonderful. Which the whole concept of that is write once, never touch it again. Yeah, it's ransomware proofing is one way of doing that, because you can't get to it anymore until you absolutely need to go and get it to restore from it. Fine. The worm model, I think, is a bit of a better fit, though, which is, write once, read many, because that way you just say, well, you can't ever overwrite this. It's just a simpler sort of concept, I think. And this whole, as I say, logically air-gapped it feels like theatre, because unless you can physically prove it's air-gapped, you're taking a lot of it on faith. I mean, a lot of the checkbox encryption from Amazon, you are taking that on faith as well. So like a lot of this is theatre, but
I suppose it's audited. By
I don't imagine they're doing any wool pulling or anything like that, but it's just like, who needs this? I mean, I assume people do need this, because they wouldn't have built it, but I don't get it.
People requiring high levels of compliance and confidentiality, I guess. But the specific feature that was launched last year was multi-party approval support in AWS organizations for logically air-gapped vaults. So I would like to get that backup. Okay, well, you need to go and seek the approval of all of these parties before you can actually bridge that air gap. So, so I guess it's, I guess you can only connect to it whilst writing, or when you have been approved to read, and the rest of the time, nobody can connect to it. But
feels like an organization that if they need air-gapped backups. They're probably pretty bureaucratic as it is. So having multi-party approval, they probably go hand in hand.
Yep. We need access to the backup. Right. Go through the approval process. Okay. A week later, it's approved. Oh, well, we found another way around it because we needed to move quicker than that. But yeah.
Right.
We recreated the data from source, like you described, Matt. So, yeah. Anyway, there we go. So quite a lot of interesting developments in the world of AWS Backup in the last 12 months. Check out the article for yourself in the show notes if you'd like to read about those things in more detail. Let's move on then to an article which may include something about MCP servers. This is an article on the AWS Cloud Financial Management blog entitled 5 Ways to Use Kiro and Amazon Q to Optimize Your Infrastructure. So it definitely mentions MCP servers in the first point. So, Matt, I think you are a DevTools community builder. So I'm going to come to you first, given that Kiro is a dev tool. So what are your thoughts on this particular use case for Kiro?
I thought this was a pretty neat article. Like I use MCPs a lot. I didn't actually think about doing like the cost optimization MCP with AWS stuff. I do want to try that in my own like production accounts and stuff to see if it spits out anything useful. For the reInvent hackathon that I did, one of the big things was using Kiro, and one of the recommendations we had leading into that was, make use of the AWS MCPs in order to, plug them into Kiro to get Kiro more knowledgeable about all of the AWS releases that had happened leading up to reInvent, right? So MCPs are incredibly useful. I use Kiro for like personal projects on the side. Claude Code is usually my daily, but it also like they all support MCPs at this point.
John, I know you've been doing quite a bit with these MCP servers as well, and Kiro.
Yes, Kiro is now our, I suppose, company standard, I guess, is what you'd call that.
We will certainly be rolling it out to all engineers if we haven't done so already, but we've approved rolling it out to the engineering team last week. So
yes, yeah. In view of the whole Claude Code versus Kiro versus this versus that versus the other, it's one of those. It just suits the workflows better. It feels like it works a bit better with AWS stuff more generally, I find, which I don't know if that's a placebo because Amazon made it, it must do, but okay. Yeah, and as a rule, the dev team, not me, weirdly, but the rest of my team are VS Code fans, and it's like it all feels quite similar, but it's just got this thing built into it. Ergo, that's where we've gone. This first use case in the list, Carl, is actually for you.
Exactly. Yes. And, I have been playing around a little bit with AI to do some of this cost optimization stuff, but not yet via Kiro and the cost optimization MCP server. So I'm excited to give that a go once we get everything set up and configured.
Yes, exactly. This is one of those things that as a consulting organization, it's a little bit faffy for us because we don't just have one set of creds that you can just go, cool, Kiro, there's your creds, go and get pricing for the org or whatever. We have to account for it slightly differently because we've got lots of customers and we want to kind of have the same conversations. But I know we've done lots of work in terms of scripting to get things like compute optimizer recommendations, cost optimization hub recommendations out using kind of the old fashioned way of doing it. Kiro can do that because there's an MCP. You ask Kiro, go get me the data, spit it out into some sort of file that I can work with and do something from there, which is really, really handy for, I wouldn't say non-technical, but sort of semi-technical businessy folks, like people compiling monthly reports and all that kind of jazz for customer bases. So that's really cool. And that's really handy. I get a little bit nervy when it starts talking about automatically apply recommendations to your infrastructure code. I get Kiro to write a lot of my code for me, but I will go through it because that's kind of what you're meant to do these days. And again, it's, go off and look at the MCP for Terraform or for whatever and tell me what I'm doing badly, give me kind of current best practices. And it's absolutely very important that you do give it access to that and the documentation as well, because what I found is when you don't give it that extra information, Kiro absolutely loves, and I think all of them absolutely love to do inline IAM policies, which is that, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Do manage policies and roles and attach it. Don't do inline policy. Why are you doing that? It loves doing them for some reason. I think because its mean time to it just works is lower than doing it properly in that use case. So giving it access to the docs and here's how you're meant to do it is kind of more useful.
Can't you just tell it in the prompt not to do that?
I mean, you can, but you have to remember to tell it to do that, which is always a thing. I haven't tried the third one. It's optimizing the /optimize command, and it hurts my soul because it's in American English, not British English. So it hurts my soul, but I shall have to try it. I mean, I know this says it's in Q Developer, but I think Q Developer has been merged into Kiro or is being merged into Kiro. I lose track of what these products are doing at this point. So I shall have to see what that looks like and give that a go.
Yeah, I was a little surprised with all the Q references in here because I was also kind of under the impression that like Q CLI turned into Kiro CLI, and they were trying to shift everything to Kiro off of Q. But
it's funny because the first iteration of this was called Code Whisperer, and then it became Q, and then I think they saw all the Star Trek memes and went, "Oh no, shouldn't call it that." That the malevolent AI that wasn't an AI, but like whatever. And now everything's being merged onto the Kiro banner. So I don't know where this actually lives, but I shall have to give this a go. Quite interestingly, you can install Q Developer into the Kiro IDE, which I think is really silly. Like you could do that. There's a plugin for it because it's just a VS Code fork, and there's a VS Code plugin, so you could do that.
Right.
So I should have to give that a go because again, optimizing things like right sizing, moving to GP3 instead of GP2, looking at auto scaling, all that kind of stuff is really handy. And if it's got access to, again, these MCPs that give it pricing data, well architected data, what you're actually, cost and usage, what you're actually using at the minute, all of that starts to help with the context piece that all of these tools have always been missing, is that you should right size that because it's enormous. Yes, but it's enormous because it needs to be. Or that's not really doing anything. No, but it's a backup resource and we need it to be hot for reasons. And it starts to bridge those sorts of gaps. I do like the SCPs via natural language because SCPs are a sod to make. They're awful, but they're really helpful once you get them properly. And then, the last one, cost optimization in your dev workflow. You should be doing that anyway. I think it's a Corey Quinn saying, and he gets quoted on this quite a lot by me, but he's right on quite a lot of these things, is in the cloud, your architecture and your cost strategy are the same thing. So this should be a thing you're doing anyway. And if you can make your workflow easier, go for hell, go for your life.
Yeah, it's interesting actually about the context files as well. So my suggestion of telling it to not provide inline policies in the code, could that go in the context file? You just create a context file and say, this is, we don't do this in our organization, therefore.
It's the sort of thing it's the sort of thing that a traditional coding standard would be. It's you must do things like this, comments must do like that, and you can give it that context.
And where does the context file live then? Does that live locally in each user's account, or could you have a kind of organization-wide context file to say, this is how we do things at Logicata, so if you're a Logicata developer or engineer using Kiro, you will only ever do it this way?
I don't know. I think it lives per repo. So because Kiro IDE is an IDE, right? It works on the concept of repositories in Git. So these files tend to get backed into source control. So it'd be per repo. And I mean, that's really easy to make organization wide because you just do things like repo defaults and what have you.
Cool.
Yeah, for Kiro, I'm not sure specifically. I do think you can have it. I mean, it definitely lives in the repo. I know like Claude Code and things they'll put stuff in your home directory, and you can do it in the .claude file or folder in the home directory, and it'll inherit stuff. I don't know if Kiro has the equivalent for that or not.
Yeah, it does, but it's one of those things that when you're onboarding a new developer, it's always one of those. Now make sure you add this to your home directory. I hate having to do that.
Yeah.
Have you been? You said you were using Kiro in the hackathon. Matt, have you used it outside of the hackathon? Has it come into your daily workflow yet?
Not for work, because we're kind of a lot of our stuff. A lot of our repos are oriented around Claude Code for work, but for personal side projects, I've been using it. So like the MCP article video that I'm going to come out with soon, I used Kiro for most of it, including spec-driven development, which I don't normally do, but I did for purposes of content.
I quite like the spec-driven development approach. I do quite a lot of it. I quite like it. The vibe stuff is useful if it's, I know exactly what needs to happen, go do this thing for me. The spec-driven stuff is useful if you've got a reasonably, sort of a medium to large sized lump of work to get through. Like I had a fairly meaty refactoring to get through because I was building something and I'd done it with a third-party module in Terraform. And as we were going through, that turned out to not be to not support something that we needed to do, and it was proving very troublesome. It kept causing drift where we didn't want it to, because it's a module, I couldn't tell Terraform to just ignore this specific thing, because we were making it in Terraform and then we were using the CI process to kind of change task definitions because it was an ECS thing. And Terraform was just absolutely losing its mind over that. So I had to unpick all of that, but I didn't want to have to go through the hard work of destroying everything, rewriting it, rebuilding it. I just told Kiro, I need to refactor from using this to doing native resources. Here's the Terraform MCP, go. And we did it through the specs, and it came out with here's what we're going to do, and we're going to do this, and then we're going to move to these sorts of resources, and then we're going to do lots of state movement so that we don't have to redeploy things, don't have to impact developers that are currently using the environment. And then we're going to write a load of property-based tests, and it wrote a lot of Terra test stuff for me, which I don't know how to write Golang, but I understand the value of testing your Terraform that isn't just, did it apply? I can understand the value of that. And it did a whole bunch of that, and it did the whole thing in about an hour and a half. It would have taken me a week. It's phenomenal.
Well, my vibe coding career came to a rather sudden end yesterday.
Oh, no.
I wasn't using Kiro.
Oh,
I was actually just playing around with Lovable, doing a personal side project, and for non-technical reasons, actually. I hadn't read the terms and conditions for the API that I was calling, and there was a quota limit, which was never ever going to be raised because it said so in the terms and conditions. But after a roundabout, contact with the support team and being referred to various online articles, and then passing the terms and conditions with AI and saying, "What should I be aware of in here?" It's like, "Yeah, you can't do that. That thing that your app is trying to do, you can't do that." So I just thought, delete, move on. I thought I was doing really well, finally creating code for the first time in my life, albeit not me creating it, but me managing the thing that's creating it. And
so you got past the buttons that weren't working.
Got past the buttons that weren't working, and created the invitation for the other user. Basically, all I was trying to do was compare two Strava profiles side by side, and that is a massive no-no in their terms and conditions. You must not create an app that puts multiple users' data in the same place, which is exactly what I was trying to do, because they don't do it very well, but they don't want anyone else to do it either. So. But I only found this out when I was trying to, once I got the buttons working, and invited the other user. The other user accepted the invitation that I sent to him, and it's like, no, too many users already authenticated or something like that, and there's a hard limit of 1 in the API. And in the terms and conditions, it will not be moved.
Oh, so, I could think of a way of working around that, but let's not go there.
Well, yeah, we're not here to talk about my personal side projects in tools that are not running on AWS. Well, maybe it is. I don't know where Lovable is running, but it's certainly not Kiro. Anyway, but moving swiftly on, the last article was in American English, which is a nice segue into the opening of the AWS European Sovereign Cloud, which is possibly still written in American English, although it's written by a Frenchman. So it's written by a Frenchman, Sebastian Stormac, and probably edited by an American editor prior to publishing on the blog. But we've spoken quite a bit about the European Sovereign Cloud on previous episodes. And last week there was an article on the AWS News blog that it's finally opening. So, of course, the whole point of the AWS European Sovereign Cloud is that it's, I guess, logically air-gapped in some way, shape, or form from the rest of AWS. So data centers that are physically located in Europe and personnel who are European citizens operating out of Europe, etc. For businesses, government departments, etc., that need that specific level of sovereignty to ensure that their data is not being stored or processed by any non-European entity. So, as I said, John, I know we've spoken about it before, but any thoughts now this thing has gone live on the European Sovereign Cloud?
Yeah, yeah. I'm just going to make sort of lots of sorts of noises and make me sound a bit like I'm Kermit the Frog, I think. which is
Don't
also
make me do
not
my Miss
European.
Piggy impression.
Please no. Please no. Yeah, the whole sovereign cloud thing. Again, it feels like theatrics. I know it's not, right? It feels like it though, because they spent boatloads of money, like X number of billions of dollars to make this, and they've got German data centers staffed mostly by Germans, and the CEO, MD, whatever his job title is, of the bloke that I say bloke, I don't know who it is. It'll be a bloke. It'll be a man, invariably, running the sovereign cloud business is a European citizen, and therefore, I don't know, it feels like a very American viewpoint, but answers to European court systems and this sort of thing. That feels like a very American litigious viewpoint to me. But that's kind of by the by. I think the business is probably still owned by Amazon Central, though. So it's like, well, how independent really is it? It's being sold as very independent, totally independent. Interestingly, from a technical perspective, it appears to be independent because you can't swap to sovereign cloud as a region in the console. You have to go and make something in that partition. It has to have its own root account. It lives in sovereign cloud, and then you get the one region. So from a technical perspective, it does appear to be isolated from the rest of AWS, which is cool. Okay, wonderful. There's a level of trust that you kind of have to accept there, that they haven't connected it to the same sorts of backbones and things. And okay, I believe them. I'm sure it's in a document somewhere, and unless you go and start inspecting their kit, which you're never going to be able to do, you sort of have to take it a little bit on trust and a little bit on faith. So it's kind of, I feel it as sovereign, but sort of, if that makes sense, right? From a technical perspective, it appears to be totally isolated from the rest of AWS. Good, wonderful. That was kind of the point. From a business perspective, they've made a lot of noise about it being staffed by Europeans. Okay, there'll be Americans kind of helping with the build out, but they're going to be gradually phased out and kind of all the rest of it. So it'll be staffed theoretically entirely by folks that are not bound by the Cloud Act, which, sidebar, I really like the US naming convention for all of their acts and things that they put through, because they've always got great acronyms. We don't tend to do that over here. It's just, okay, it's just called that. Cool. So folks that aren't necessarily bound by that because they're not American citizens and they don't pay tax to the IRS, they pay tax to, the Germans. But as far as I could work out, the business that is running sovereign cloud is still owned by Amazon US. So I don't, time will tell if that becomes a problem or not.
I have just noticed, actually, I was scrolling all the way down to the end of this, that the article is also published in German, French, Italian, and Spanish. So that's going to become, well, I suppose all translated automatically these days, isn't it? But if every communication about the European sovereign cloud has to come out in 5 languages, it could be a bit onerous to be publishing content about it. But I don't know. What do you think about this, Matt? I mean, I guess it's kind of outside of your kind of things that you're interested in on a day-to-day basis, but what
it doesn't really apply to me personally, but I have, like, it feels like it's going to be very specific to probably like government type organizations. Like a Facebook's not going to use sovereign cloud because there'd be zero portability if a user is traveling outside of Europe to the United States or wherever, right? Couldn't access their data. So it would have to be for very specific, use cases, which, yeah, great, sure.
German federal police is the one that comes to mind because they've been very vocal about not liking Amazon in the past.
Yeah. I don't know. Are there Google Cloud and Azure sovereign clouds?
Not that I've heard.
That's a good point, actually. I've never actually looked into that. I mean, there are non-tier 1 cloud providers who are constantly kind of pushing their sovereignty. So there's companies like OVH, can't think of any others off the top of my head. Maybe Hetzner's more of a kind of a VPS provider. I think OVH does a little bit more than that. But, none of them have the breadth of services or the scale of an AWS or a GCP or a Microsoft Azure. So although, they are credible kind of server farms or server barns or whatever the terminology is, they don't have the kind of 200 300 product portfolio with all the kind of AI capabilities, etc., that you would get from a hyperscaler. So and I'm not sure they ever will be able to compete at that sort of level. So I think there's always going to be a requirement for this kind of thing if you've got forward thinking businesses who've got specific kind of data sovereignty, data residency requirements, and want to leverage those types of services rather than building it all themselves. So, but it's a great question. I need to go away and figure out whether GCP and Azure have similar sovereign clouds. I suspect if they don't, they probably are in the process of putting them together. And, clearly there's been a market opportunity validated here, because I think John mentioned the numbers before, but I saw somewhere in the article $7.8 billion has been invested in this already. So Amazon must have some kind of path to return on investment.
7.8 billion euro.
Oh, euros, was it? So that's even more than dollars then, isn't it? Yeah. Yes. So not small sums of money going into building this European sovereign cloud. So, it'd be interesting to see the announcements moving forward as who's adopting it. Although perhaps there won't be any, because it will all be top secret, hush hush. And if you don't work for Amazon or the European sovereign cloud, you won't know. Anyway, let's move on from the European sovereign cloud to a fairly similar topic, but albeit on a smaller scale. That Amazon is planning a data center site at a former power plant site in the UK. There was the Vale of Whitehorse District Council.
Yes, it's brilliant.
Planning, is planning a data center site on the former Didcot A power station, which has now been decommissioned. So, John, what were your thoughts on this one?
Well, we hear a lot of Amazon AWS putting data centers in slightly odd places. I think I said this last week on the pod, that they tend to be right next door to old decommissioned or not quite decommissioned nuclear reactors in the States, because cool, we need the power. Right. Well, this one is sort of at the end of its run life, but we can spend a bunch of money that infrastructure providers don't want to spend and make it good to run for another 40 years or whatever, because that's one of those central government, federal governments don't tend to like spending money on these things. I've found that, if you have big Amazon type person that's gone, yeah, okay, we'll do it, they have functionally unlimited money. It's a bit scary, really. But this is the first of the new data centers that we've heard of being, I think, in an old power station as opposed to just kind of near one. For the uninitiated, Didcot A was a coal-fired power station that was built in the 60s, connected to the grid in the 70s, and closed a little bit over 10 years ago now. And 3 of its 6 cooling towers were knocked down about 10 years ago. And almost exactly 10 years ago, the boiler of one of the buildings collapsed and killed 4 people. So this is not a safe place, let's put it that way. And then 6 years ago, the remaining towers were taken down again to kind of make it safe. But this is, I don't know if you'd even call it a brownfield site. I don't know if that term translates, but certainly in the UK, greenfield sites, brand new, nothing ever been there. Brownfield, you've built on it before. And I think there's sort of grey fields and things like that as well, where you're building on something that is actually contaminated and you have to do things like taking soil out and all this kind of jazz. So this is something that you wouldn't really want to put houses on. You couldn't turn it back into farmland because it's very contaminated sites. If we can build something useful on there, I'm all for it. More data centers in the UK, I'm generally all for as well. We don't hear so much, we did a little bit ago, but we don't hear so much around grid pressure and what have you in the UK that you certainly hear about whenever they talk about data centers in Ireland, because we spoke about that last week, and you hear a lot about Irish grid pressure and them having to commit to 70 odd megawatts of power from this, that, or the other. So we don't really hear a huge amount of that in the UK. But then we don't hear a lot of data center building in the UK. I think it's more expensive than Ireland and there's more tax to pay and all these sorts of things. But I like this generally. I don't think it's entirely a data center because it talks about a full campus and it costing £2 billion and so on and so on.
Yeah, what I thought was quite interesting about this is usually the data center locations are a fairly closely guarded secret. They're not that public about specifically where the data centers are located, whereas this tells you specifically if they're going to build data centers there, people are going to know exactly where they are. Which, I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Matt? Do you know where all the kind of your nearest facilities are? I guess you know, like roughly what state and city they're in, but specifically.
So I live in Northern
address?
Virginia, which is where US East 1 is. So
yeah,
I mean, I generally know where they are.
Yeah.
Haven't really been to them personally, but I've driven by them. I don't know. It's not something I think about a lot. If they are implying a campus, like whatever part of the UK that's in, is there a tech center nearby? Like,
No.
are they trying to? Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's near Oxford, so
Yes.
yeah,
I wouldn't call Oxford a tech centre.
I suppose Cambridge is more of a tech centre than Oxford, isn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of out in the middle of Oxfordshire. It's very kind of green, leafy, lovely part of the country. I wouldn't exactly call it a technological hotbed.
Well,
So
it will be if
in
it stays there.
that sense.
Northern Powerhouse. There you go. There's a British political reference.
In that sense, I agree with John in that, like, it's great that they can reuse the area that's probably not going to turn into like farmland or anything else, because the coal probably did stuff to the environment and all that. Plus, it has the power infrastructure to consume power as opposed to put it out, probably.
Yeah.
I guess the other didn't a couple summers ago, weren't there like big blackouts and brownouts in, like,
No,
I want to say London.
no.
No.
Not a dicky bird. There was lots of. Tell you what happened. There was lots of noise about it because of the whole disconnecting from Russian gas infrastructure and all this kind of jazz. There was lots of noise about it potentially happening, and the national grid, who run the grid ecosystem, run the grid system, just kind of republished, or it was discovered that they have this plan for rolling blackouts and all this kind of thing. That plan has existed for about 40 years and it hasn't changed in I think 2 decades. But some tabloid-esque journalist got hold of it, and there was this big media frenzy about, there's going to be blackouts, and here's when it's going to be, and you're going to be affected, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. We had a handful of voluntary power downs, if that makes sense, where you would be paid for using less power at a certain time as a consumer. And I did that. I have the capacity to do that. I have a battery in my house and I have solar panels and I can charge my battery from the grid. And it wasn't use less power overall. It was use less power in this particular time slot. So what did I do? I charged my battery up right before that and therefore used functionally no power. And I got paid like £1 for using basically no grid power in that couple of hours. That was kind of all that happened. Really, it was much ado about nothing.
Yeah,
we did have a power cut. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but it lasted long enough to go outside the door and look at all the neighbours and goes, "Your power off." Oh, it's back on again now, and that was that. So literally a couple of minutes.
We had a big one a couple of years ago, but that was just because of botched local maintenance at a substation and it blew up. That was it.
Well, there we go. Lots of investment in data centers in the UK, Europe, and beyond. I think I saw one today about South Korea, billions of dollars going into South Korea from Amazon for data centers there as well. So,
they've got money to spend.
Lots of money to be spent and invested in data centers around the globe. But that brings us to the end of our time for Season 5, Episode 3 of Logicast. So all it remains is for me to thank you, John, as always, for your insights and your input. And thank you, Matt. It's great to have you back on the podcast again. I can't believe it's been 2 years already since we had you on the podcast last. Let's not leave it so long again before we get you back on for another guest appearance. So really appreciate you joining us again today.
Thanks for having me.
Sharing your insights on the AWS news. If you've made it this far as a listener, thank you very much for listening. If you'd like to see the funny faces that we're pulling when we're talking to you, you can see that on our YouTube channel. If you have enjoyed it, give us a like, a rating, a follow, tell your friends. We are available to download from wherever you download your podcasts, and as I said, on the Logicata YouTube channel. We will be back next week with another episode of Logicast for you. Until then, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you again next time.